Hello everyone, welcome to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. So good to have you tuning in. Of course, so many of you watch this show as a replay, like Pedro normally does, but Pedro is actually, for the first time, I can see Pedro's comment there, is tuning in to watch the show live. Good to have you watching the show live, Pedro. And we have got a very exciting show lined up for you today. As you know, we have some of the most amazing guests on our show, and our guest today is no exception to that rule. Marci Rosenberg, or Marci Daniels Rosenberg, she'll probably correct me in a moment, is coming on to the show, and we're going to talk about SOVT, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. And SOVTs are just so fantastic, but here's the kicker. You've got to kind of do them right. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to unpack them. We're going to really understand what they are, why we do them. If you've been following this channel for any length of time, you'll have heard me talk about SOVTs before, but it's always good to have someone else come on and we get to really nut it out even further. So I'm looking forward to that. Wherever you are, I hope you are safe. I hope you are healthy. In the US, you are coming up to a really important, was it 7 days, 9 days? Oh dear. We in the world, we're all watching with bated breath to see which way your country goes. But regardless, we hope you're safe. We hope you're healthy. And yeah, over the last weekend, I just wanted to give you a very brief update because I do want to get straight to our guest. For many of you would know that for the last 2 years, in fact, it's been for the last 4 years, I have served on the Australian Voice Association National Board. And for the last 2 years, I've been the national president. Well, that came to an end for me on Sunday night at our annual general meeting. All above board. It was, you can only serve on the board for 4 years and a maximum of 2 years as a president. And so constitutionally, my tenure came to an end. And wow, what a big 4 years. And who would have thought that in my final year as being president that we'd be dealing with COVID as well. But nonetheless, wanted to all update you about that. The new board going forward are a fantastic group of people. And so if you're an Aussie, and then you should know you're in good hands with the board going forward as they continue to create PD, professional development for voice professionals like myself and like my guest, Marci Daniels Rosenberg. And we're going to get to, I'll get myself all ready here. And where am I? I'm sure I can figure this out. Right after this, we're going to come back and I'm going to introduce our very special guest. I hope you will stick around.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hello, Marci. So good to have you on the show.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. It's so good. I've just read. Do you know what I realized before we started is that I haven't double checked our audio, and so I'm going to be checking the audio as we go along here to make sure that we're both equal. So Linda, keep an eye out for me. Linda's our great moderator in the chat. So if the audio levels are out, Linda will let me know. Marci, it is so good to have you join us once again. I was looking actually back to see when was the last time that you were on the show. It was literally August last year. Hasn't a lot happened?
A lot has happened, yes. Indeed.
Wowzers.
We're still standing, so.
We are. In one form or another, we're still standing. Right. It is so good to have you on the show. You know, when we, for those people who are watching who don't know you, and there might be a few of those who are new to the channel, etc. I thought we'd just take a quick moment to bring people up to speed. Of course, you are the co-author of this most magnificent book, and this I'm the proud owner of the second edition. I've read the first edition cover to cover, I think twice. I'm halfway through reading the second edition cover to cover, but this has quickly become, you know, one of my Bibles that I regularly refer to. It's been such a success, this book. How is it that you and your co-author Wendy, who has also been on this show before, how is it that you and Wendy came to write this book?
There was a need for it back. I mean, we probably started talking about it maybe informally. We met in maybe 2008, 2009, something like that. And we, you know, had very common interests, and we just started talking about what book did we wish existed.
Yeah.
And so, and at that time, there really wasn't a formal sort of scientifically evidence-based referenced book for, with special attention to more contemporary styles in musical theater, with also a lot of vocal health information also incorporated into it. And so we just wrote it. We kind of just sat down and said, what should be in this book? What can we contribute to the field that's not already existing?
Yeah.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but how can we contribute to the field? And so we started sketching it out. It took us, you know, maybe probably 3 years to write the first edition. And then now we're in our second, so...
And we are all so thankful that you did, because it really does, you know, bring together so much research from so many different fields, and really gives us a singular text. So I would really encourage everyone, if you're thinking you'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into vocal pedagogy and those sorts of things, then this is a great starting text. It's so accessible in its language, and for those people who are just starting out to sort of dip their toe into vocal pedagogy, it's such a great place to start, and it draws on some of the most respected voices, excuse the pun, within the field of voice research and science and practice as well, which I think is really, you know, what sets the book apart. So yeah, it really is an outstanding text. One of the things that you touch on in the book is SOVTs, and it was when I was looking back over our show that we did 12 months ago together, and when you came on, and you know, we had it listed at the end of the things that we were going to talk about. And we got so caught up in talking about exercise physiology that we just didn't get to it, and yet it's such close, right? we didn't even touch it, I don't think, from memory. Let's make amends. Let's get into talking about semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. I wonder whether you might be able to just give us a brief overview of what an SOVT is, what qualifies it, and, you know, take it away.
Absolutely. So when I am working with either private voice clients or patients in the clinic, and I use semi-occluded vocal tract exercises in both settings, the way I explain it is that we think about, you know, we've got lung pressure, and the vocal folds are going to take this aerodynamic pressure and convert it into acoustic energy. And so when we put any kind of a narrowing above the level of the vocal folds, so that could be at the level of the tongue elevating, it could be making something a nasal sound, it could be doing that with the lips. Anything that creates any kind of a narrowing above the vocal folds creates a bit of a traffic jam of acoustic pressure. And so that energy has to go somewhere. So it's going to take the path of least resistance, and some of it's going to travel back down to the level of the vocal folds, and you're going to get a bit of a back pressure, a positive pressure that's pushing on the vocal folds, sort of unpressing them. And so the analogy that I would have a patient do or a student do is if you take your hands and put them together like this, these are the vocal folds. Now, if you mush them together really firmly, this would be the equivalent of sort of pressed phonation. And so now if you just kind of relax your hands, they're still touching, but they're not mushed together. That's kind of what that back pressure does. It sort of unpresses the vocal folds, allowing them to vibrate in a manner that is a lot more efficient. And so you then, the vocal folds and the vocal tract start working together in synergy so that your sound production becomes more efficient rather than working against each other. So it's like when you've got the little paddle with the ping pong ball that's attached to the rubber band. If you hit the ball right at the exact time, you're going to get a nice propelling of the ball. Whereas if you hit the ball when the paddle's already sort of back this way, you're not going to get as efficient a bounce. Or if you're chasing the ball after it's already moved in the other direction, it's not going to be as efficient. So it's sort of the lining up of sort of this, that it's like that perfect vibratory behavior. And so that is what a semi-occluded vocal tract exercise, if done correctly, sets up the vocal folds to do.
One of the key points that I think you just made, which I just want to talk a little bit more about if you wouldn't mind, and that is this non-linear understanding of the vocal tract, and that our voice does not travel on a simple linear path, that there is this backflow of resonance, acoustic, that we do need to account for, that semi-occluded vocal tract exercises really help to develop. Can you unpack that non-linear understanding a little bit further for us?
Well, I mean, so the idea is that you want to create a self-sustaining oscillating system. So you want the pressure when the pressure above the level of the vocal folds is positive, you want it to be positive as the vocal folds are opening. And then as the vocal folds are closing, we get more of a negative pressure that's going to help close them. So it's sort of getting the pressures to play nicely with the timing of the vocal fold closure, gets us what is that self-sustained oscillating system, where now you've got vocal fold vibration that's kind of on autopilot, if you will. So it's sort of, you're setting up an efficiency so that it's happening without a lot of extra work having to happen. The other analogy that a lot of people talk about is when you're on a swing, it's giving you that extra little push at the exact right moment so that you're going to go farther.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, and it really sets up that sense of balance, doesn't it? The activities definitely. That we. So let's talk about the different types, and you kind of touched on a few there, because I often refer to SOVTs as a family of exercises. I wonder whether you could introduce us to the members of that family.
Yes, well, so probably the most well-known is the straw phonation. But, you know, before we were all talking about straws, we've all been doing semi-occluded vocal tract exercises in our voice studios, in our clinics. We just may not have called them that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But lip trill is considered an SOVT. A hum is considered an SOVT because the nasal passage is more narrow than an open mouth. The more occluded vowels, like an E, is considered an SOVT position compared to an ah. So there are just things you can do without props that are semi-occluded vocal tract positions. Then we have the straws, right? And so within the straw world, we've got, you can play around with all sorts of different diameters. This is the smoothie straw, this is the drinking straw, and then there's the smaller one, which I don't know if I have in my little straw bag here, which would be more like the coffee stirring straw.
Yeah.
And these can be done out, and these can be done in the air. These can be done, and I think we're going to get into sort of playing around with how to do variations, but you can do water resistance therapy, which is the straw in the water.
Yeah.
But then moving away from the straw, we've got things like the cup phonation, which is actually something that I wrote up, I think maybe back in 2010, in exercises for voice therapy, which was when I took a styrofoam cup and put a little hole on the end because I wanted to be able to do connected speech with an occlusion. But now a much more efficient way to do that is actually by getting these sort of disposable anesthesia masks that you can now use and cover and create an occlusion. So this is called the Lax Vox,
The
which
Vox?
is it's fairly pricey, but it's something that you can order online that's designed to create a semi-occluded vocal tract as well. So there are lots of different ways that you can do a semi-occluded vocal tract. We could, Dan, I don't know if you want to start. We could start playing around with them.
Let's play a bit. Let's introduce people to the different to the different activities, and people can even join in at home as they, or on the bus or the subway or wherever they are, start making
Not if you're driving.
No, you're not allowed to do this if you are driving. Agreed. So why don't you lead us through some activities, and maybe give us, direct us in what we should be looking for as we do them.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the straw, because I think that's probably the one that gets the most press. No pun intended.
Boom.
And Dr. Ingo Tietze is probably the one that's going to get credit, not for inventing it and starting it, because that way preceded Dr. Tietze, but he certainly has done a significant amount of the scientific writing within the field of voice science and voice pathology.
He certainly has
really
brought it to the fore, hasn't he? He's really,
yes.
brought it to our attention, and the significance and the importance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he is really a proponent of the coffee stirring straw diameter, which is a little bit smaller than the drinking straw. I will tell you that what I tend to do is I tend to start with more of a drinking. So this is like, in a movie theater and you're going to have Pepsi and they give you the straw. It's about that sort of generic size. But then I will always vary diameters within a patient, and that's more of a motor learning issue, so that the vocal tract and the vocal folds get used to adjusting to different diameters and different levels of resistance. But I will typically start with this, and then the way I will instruct is that I will say, put it about a good 1.5 inches in your mouth, and it's kind of like you're blowing out a candle, so it's a very gentle around the straw. You want it to be sealed, but you're not pressing. Everything on the inside is in what I call the duh position, so sort of just relaxed. You don't need to try to open anything or lower anything. You just want everything to be nice and neutral and relaxed, like you're just duh. That's the shape on the inside. And then comfortable speaking range. One of the things that I tend to notice when people come into my clinic and they say, oh yeah, I do that with my voice teacher, or I learned that once in a workshop, and I always say, great, show me how you learn to do it, show me what you do. And almost always, especially females, will immediately go up into a high sort of register with it, and I don't ever start like that. I will always say start in a nice, comfortable, mid-level speaking range, and then it's just very gentle, meandering kind of pitch hills is how I tend to ask them to start. So something along the lines of and the sensory cue that I will give for that is that you want to focus on what is the maximum amount of buzzing and vibration you can possibly get anywhere in here, behind the teeth, up on the roof of the mouth, and on your fingertips through the straw. So you really want to be focusing on that sensation of buzzing and vibration in the front. However, even more important than that is that it needs to feel very easy
Free.
here.
Yeah.
Easy and open here.
Yeah.
Because you can create an artificial energy up here and not be open here. So this is what causes the buzzing and the sensations in the front. So this buzzing and sensory energy that you feel here is the result of things being in a nice, open, and relaxed state. And I think that people sometimes put the cart before the horse with that. And they're focusing so much on just buzz, 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 buzz. But it's not with this component in mind. And then I think you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So it's both of those. Do I feel open here, and do I feel forward and buzzy here? So that's how I tend to instruct. I don't know, Dan, do you have anything different than you do than that? Do you have any additional nuance to add to that?
No, what I you know, sometimes I'm just sitting here feeling affirmed.
Oh, I know, isn't that good? Don't you love that? Yes.
You know, I particularly love your use of the multiple sizes.
Yeah.
I refer to them as stirring straws or cocktail straws.
Right.
And I often think of them as sort of beginner, intermediate, advanced, because the really small diameter ones are quite challenging to get that breath flow just right, which is why more often than not, like yourself, I start students with just a normal drinking size straw. So yeah, please continue.
Yeah, and I think so, if you have a student that is really holding and gripping and constricted, a coffee stirring straw might actually cause them to grip a little more.
Absolutely, yep.
So I agree with you. So I will start with this. Here's the other mistake I think a lot of people make when they are doing straw phonation or all sorts of kinds of exercises is you've got to be willing to play in the sandbox. You've got to be willing to sort of meander your way around the exercise and pay attention to what you're feeling and what you're noticing, understanding that it's a spectrum. It's not this is the wrong and this is the right. So as long as you're moving in this direction, then to me that's a productive experience. So let your students fumble around with it if they need to, so that they find that sensory feedback, that kinesthetic feedback over time, even if it takes 5 or 10 minutes of sort of gentle little probes from you. Try this, try that. But it's okay to spend a little bit of time initially to make sure that you're actually doing it correctly. It is well worth that investment of time at the beginning. People get very antsy and they start immediately adjusting and altering. Oh, it's not right. Okay, try it this way. Let them experience it a little bit and ask them to provide feedback about what they are noticing with the buzzing and the vibration and the easiness here. And you'll find that they can cue themselves into the correct production. But sometimes it takes time.
Yeah, a rhetoric that I'm using a lot more in my studio these days is encouraging students to play.
Yes.
And with the sense of that, the overarching idea of that play is having personal exploration. And I think because we do live, we're living in a world of black and white, of rights and wrongs. Learning to explore the greys and to apply that to our own morphology, to have that experience, and exactly what you're saying, to feel. And I often say to students, I want to give you the permission to play. I want you to search for where it's going to sit right for you. Certainly we can, as you're saying, we create parameters in that is a safe place to play, but then people discover different placements, if you will, within that playground that will really work for them.
Yeah. And the term I use for that process, that experiential process, is you're nudging the boat a little bit, right? So as the teacher, it's really not our job to manipulate them into the correct iteration of the exercise. So if you think of sort of like a little rowboat on the water, if it's a little bit going off course, you're not going to pick the boat up and put it back on course. You're just going to give it a little nudge from the side.
Love it.
And let it sort of correct itself. But it's the student that really is leading that process, or the patient that has to lead that process. But that takes more time.
It does take more time. That's the kicker, isn't it? Yeah. It takes time.
Right. It takes time, and we live in a culture of like, I got to get it done. I got to get it done. But the analogy of like, this is where we're at. This is what we consider to be like the target. And anything that moves you from here towards this direction to any degree at all, in my mind, is productive.
Yeah.
So, and with SOVTs, there are a lot of different ways to explore. So if straw is just really not creating the right setup for a certain person, you can move this. So then let's segue into another variation of this, is you can then take the straw and do the straw in the water. So drinking, again, the drinking parameters where I would start. You do not want a full cup of water. It's a little overkill with the resistance. You really only want a few inches in the bottom of the cup.
And just on that point, Marci, for people often go, oh, does the resistance that you referred to there? People are quite surprised at how much difference there is in resistance by simply even changing the volume of water by 2 centimeters in your glass. And I often will get students to start off with a fuller glass so they experience it. Then I get them to either drink a little bit, or so that they feel that difference in resistance. Because and if you're doing this at home, everyone, I'd encourage you to play around with that and experience the change in pressure that Marci is indicating. Yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously the more water, the more resistance and the more back pressure.
Yeah.
And, I think there are a lot of studies on semi-occluded vocal tract stuff, and not as much studying on is there such a thing as too much of a good thing. And I think there's just now starting to be some research coming out looking at it, is there such a thing as too much resistance, putting too much load on the vocal folds? And all of that kind of research is emerging. So, so I tend to say a few inches of water, put the straw in about maybe 1.5 inches, something along those lines. And then it's the same kind of idea. So I'll back up a little bit. So it's just always start comfortable speaking range. Now I will have my students or my patients pinch the straw so that they've got a little bit more resistance, and play around and see what that feels like. You can also add puffed cheeks to this if you want. So there are all sorts of variations that you can do when you're playing around with semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. But the experiential process is really not nearly as useful if you don't have something to compare it to. So before you start doing these kinds of exercises, sing a few measures of something or vocalize a little bit and get a sense of what things feel like before you start playing around with whatever SOVT you're doing, so that you can then try singing something after, so that your nervous system kind of has a feel for what differences may or may not be happening. Because a lot of what happens in voice training is in the pause in between.
Yes.
And your nervous system is taking notes. And so don't rob yourself of that opportunity to sort of integrate what you're experiencing on a kinesthetic level.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I remember in my uni years, we were taught that music is mostly made up of silence, and it's actually the points where we don't hear anything that gives contrast to the points where we do hear things. And the same thing is happening in our learning in studios. I watch a lot of the learning take place when the student's not doing anything, because the brain is working that through cognitively. I do just want to highlight for everyone watching, something I neglected to do at the very beginning when I introduced you, Marci, is to explain to people that you are not only a singing teacher, you're a speech pathologist, which is why indeed you keep referring to your students and your patients. And I just wanted to clarify that for everyone so that people who have not met you before might understand that.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yes.
to jump in there.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I think that we were always taught in our pedagogy classes that there's sort of respiratory, phonatory, articulation, the subsystems.
Yeah.
But what everybody ignored was, I think, the system that's probably the most important system, and that's the nervous system, the brain part of voice training, and that's when a lot of the pausing, the thinking about what you've just done, observing
Yes.
it, verbalizing what it is,
Yes.
instead of the teacher just saying this was right, this was not right. And again, that takes time. So when we're having our students do the straw or the mask or whatever it is, you really just want to do a handful of them and then pause. And see what you're noticing. What are you observing? Make some sounds, verbalize what you're observing if you're, with your teacher, with your student. But the pause is when the brain is taking notes, is what I always say to my patients.
Yeah.
So don't rob yourself of that opportunity.
It's taking the moment to be mindful. I often say to my students, be present.
Right.
Be
Yes.
be in the moment, which our general way of society doesn't encourage us, does it? It's got us going hell for leather constantly. But with our voice, in learning to inhabit our instrument, we do have to do exactly what you're encouraging us to do, and that is to pause and to be in. Yes.
And I will have from time to time a patient come in, and I can tell that they are in a very when we talk about the nervous system, sympathetic dominant state, which is more of like the fight flight
Yes.
Zone. And if they're a little bit more in that zone, there's just no point in doing any teaching until you can sort of help them neutralize a little bit so they can get a little bit closer to more parasympathetic state. So a slow mindfulness exercise, a slow breathing exercise, and not because I'm teaching them breathing, is to speak to the nervous system and get them a little bit better primed for learning. And so those are the things, where the straw phonation and all of those kinds of things are great and wonderful, but they're really not going to be nearly as helpful if the nervous system is ignored in this process. So I think I always think it's so important to talk about that
Absolutely.
component. And I think people are talking more and more and more about that. Heidi Mott, have you had Heidi on yet?
I haven't had Heidi on the show, no, but I do know of Heidi, yes.
Yeah, so she has a wonderful Facebook page called Minding the Gap, where she really does a deep dive into the neurology component, voice production, and she has a really wonderful 2-day seminar that she does on the brain and singing, which is really
Wow.
which is really great. It's a pretty deep dive. So
Yeah. So
anyway, we did digress. Didn't we?
that's okay. Digression is the spice of these hangouts. Now, of course, SOVTs serve such a wonderful purpose. and we're by no means are we suggesting that SOVTs are the be-all and end-all of voice development or voice rehab in a speech pathologist session, or they play a really significant role, though. So where do you find yourself applying the, where is the application? Where do you really put the rubber to the road, so to speak, with these activities?
They really are very ubiquitous, these exercises. So I use them. They're wonderful for like post-op rehabilitation. They're wonderful to use. I also use them, I use them with almost all of my patients, to be honest with you, in some fashion. They're really nice as a calibrator.
Yeah.
So before you're going to do technical work with singing, with a student, doing a series of, a couple minutes of semi-occluded vocal tract to really calibrate the instrument so that it's in a good, nice, efficient shape, will make the voice lesson so much more efficient, because then you don't have to vocalize and spend a lot of time with that kind of warm-up. You can just get your voice calibrated and then start working on technical things. I think you should be able to get your voice warmed up within 10 minutes, really. If you understand your instrument, you shouldn't be spending a whole lot more time than that. But then they also are really great for technical work. So the anesthesia mask, which you can get a bag of them on Amazon for like $30, and they come in these little. Have you played around with these yet, Dan?
No, I haven't. I must admit, I can just see the postal service questioning. What is this?
Right. Yeah. What's going on at the house?
Yeah.
So they come individually wrapped. Now, when I teach master classes and that kind of stuff, I always show up, in a bag full of these, and they can have a patient come and bring it back. They just have their own, and they can wipe it with alcohol. But these are great because you get a great seal. This particular kind comes with a syringe that you can put in and pump a little air to make this tighter.
Right.
And they do come in different sizes. I think that these are an adult medium, I guess it says. And so you get a nice full seal, and then with your hand you control how much occlusion you're going to introduce into the exercise. So, you do something like, So that's pretty occlusive, and you can use this. This is great for working on mix, to really get that lighter registration. This is great because they can you can do connected speech in it, and you can control how much closure there is. And so I'll have students do, something like this, and then immediately take it away and go right into the phrase and sing the phrase again, so that they have an understanding of what that feels like to be producing that lighter, mixier sound. So the masks are great for that. If you don't want props, if you're one that doesn't like props, you can do it. You can get a similar effect. It's not quite as good with your hands. So this one is the
okay.
That's the shape. Can you see that? So it's like when you're in the pool when you were a kid and you were like squirting water, and then that's your cup, and so then that goes.
Ooh.
And you can do connected speech in that way also.
Something we haven't touched on with many of these SOVTs. We've talked about the occlusion. Something we haven't touched on, and I wonder if you might just talk to, is the way it changes the length of the vocal tract with a number of these activities, the straw, the face mask.
Lengthening, right. So if you're adding something, you are increasing vocal tract length, which is going to shift the formants and do acoustic things.
The acoustic things.
which will hopefully favor more resonant
Yeah.
voice production.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is a very effective semi-occluded vocal tract exercise is actually just a nice pure E vowel. And it's really surprising how many singers come in and actually can't do a pure E vowel. And often I'll see it with singers who have a lot of ensemble choral singing, because vowels are always modified. They're always told that E is too bright, and so E really becomes I, and then they're kind of stuck there in that gear.
Yeah.
But if in coaxing a brighter E and allowing the tongue to sort of, in that part, versus anything that's happening further back and grabbing, that actually increases the space in the back of the throat here. Counter to what a lot of people think, which is an ah, if it's a swallow, you're actually narrowing the space, and not in the good narrowing occlusive way. So a nice E vowel, letting the tongue come up, that sounds like a nice bright E, is a wonderful semi-occluded vocal tract exercise that doesn't require any props. But it's allowing the tongue to find that more neutral position instead of pulling back towards more modified, artificially darkened vowels. So that's another way that I will use them.
We are nearly out of time.
Are we really? Next year.
Yeah.
Gosh.
It's you know, it never ceases to amaze me how quickly these guest sessions go. But we're singing the praises, obviously, of SOVTs because they are just so fabulous. I wonder if we could just very briefly touch on, when are there times where an SOVT would not be the go-to? Is there times? And secondly, is it possible to, and we've kind of sort of meandered and mentioned this a couple of times, but you know, when are we not doing them correctly? You know, what are the things that we really have to attend to? So there's two things there that I think we'll have to finish on.
Right. So when not to do them is, so first of all, I think the thing that people forget about SOVTs is that it's not a panacea. So it's not the only thing we ever need to do. There's a lot more to training voice than just putting a straw in somebody's mouth and telling them to do it. So having said that, I will almost always try SOVTs with especially with singers, to see how their body responds. I'm not going to immediately post-operatively, you know, within the first 48 hours, jump immediately in for something like this. You know, but there are not a whole lot of times when it is contraindicated, other than you have to know your student and observe what their experience is when they are doing an SOVT, and then modify if needed. But these are just tools, right? And so we have to know, why are we doing a semi-occluded vocal tract exercise with our student, or what is the goal? Because the exercise is only as good as the intention behind it. So if you're just randomly throwing a straw at every single student and say, just do that, then it's not helpful at all, because there's not really a rhyme or reason to why you're giving them that. So that, to me, is more important than, are there times to not do it? And more important is, why are you choosing to do it?
Because if in taking that sort of, you know, tar everything with the same brush approach, it's not empowering the student to be in the moment. They're just parroting, aren't they? And I
do think that the SOVTs, they're seemingly very simple on paper, but I do think that they're often done incorrectly. And I think there are some nice YouTube videos out with instruction, but if it's a lay person watching that, and that's their first introduction to it, that's not the way to learn it, in my opinion. So I think you really do need to have a teacher teach you who really knows how to do it. I mean, and as I was telling you, Dan, I'm going to be, probably this coming winter, I'm going to be starting to do some virtual master classes and workshops, really digging into all the different kinds of SOVTs and how one might use them in a lesson and in a singing context and all that kind of stuff, because I think there's a lot of information on YouTube, but without one-on-one interaction, there's nobody to help monitor, are you doing it correctly or not correctly?
And I think that's a general rule when it comes to YouTube. And as a YouTuber, you know, I'm often saying and trying to remind people that, look, the YouTube space plays a role. It introduces you to certain things. But at the end of the day, the gold standard is to have someone responding to you, reacting to you, you know, nominating when things are right, nominating when things are not so right, and helping to give you that nudge that you were talking about earlier in today's session, just to bring you back online a little bit. And it's so, I mean, I'd encourage everyone to check out your masterclass. When do you hope to go live with those?
So I'm right in the process of redoing my website. I'm hoping to just start with probably this winter.
Yeah, wonderful.
And keep them relatively small so that so it really can have a masterclass feel where we're really having people come up when they're on the screen and, you know, working together and trying different things in a singing context.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, I mean, I guess I'll let you know, Dan, and then you can...
Let me know and I'll spread the word, because that would be wonderful. And as it has been wonderful having you on today's show.
Time flies, boy.
Oh, wow. You know, and that's saying something this year, isn't it? Because time does feel like it has not flown in 2020, right. But there you are. Thank you for coming on again and sharing such a wealth, a depth of knowledge. I do want to once again just say to people, if you haven't already got this book, why not? It's so good. And you know, look, before I'd ever had Wendy or Marci on the show, I had been singing the praises of the first edition, admittedly. I'd been singing the praises of this book when I first came across it, because it is just such a wonderful resource. And I really think every singing teacher should, and every really serious singer should have it on their shelf. And don't just use it as a resource. Like, it's worth a cover-to-cover read. So I encourage you to do that. Marci, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Oh, it's really, the pleasure has really literally been all mine. Thanks for coming on. Well, there you go, everyone. I promised it. I said today would be special, and it was. So much practical stuff going on there, and there's so much in what we've just covered that I really encourage you to go back, watch this video again. You're the only person that's going to benefit from that, and I really want you to really hear everything and really digest everything that Marci's taught us today. Next week we're coming back with a Q&A, so you'll have your questions ready and I'll have hopefully a few answers, and we'll get into that. Don't forget, before the end of the year, we have 2 more guests coming up. We've got Dr. Joan Melton coming on the show. We've got Professor Brian Gill coming on. As I said, we have the best people come on this show, and I'm always humbled by the generosity of our guests. And Marci today, really no different. It was so good. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.